Thanks for joining the Texas Education 911 podcast, where we talk to the people who know children the best, parents, sharing stories of the reality of the public school system. We also talk to teachers, researchers, and others who care deeply about what's happening and not happening in our school system. You'll see why we need change. Let's get started with today's episode.
Welcome to Texas Education 411, where Texas Education 911 gives you the 411 on what's happening on your Texas ISD. My name is Aileen Blakowski, and I am your host. I am here today representing not only parents, but we're actually getting a lot of outreach from educators as well. And so today we are joined with a North Texas educator who was recently forced out of a North Texas school district. And we're going to talk to him today. We've been talking a lot about the grievance process, and apparently we parents aren't the only ones having an issue with the grievance process. So Nico, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing me to come on, talk with y'all. Y'all have been very communicative. All it took was one email, and now I'm here. So, very appreciative, and it's very important that this is taking place.
It is. It sure is. I want to thank you again for your courage for stepping up and being willing to talk with us. Oftentimes, there's a narrative out there that parents are angry with teachers and that we shouldn't attack teachers. But I think through our conversations with our advocates, we've learned that actually good teachers and good parents are actually on the same side of the issues, right?
We're on the same page.
We are.
We're on the same chapter, same book.
That's
everything.
So, Nico, tell us a little bit about yourself and your education journey.
Yeah, so I have been officially in the Texas public school system for 5 years, but I began back in high school. I've always worked with youth, community outreach through the YMCA, FCA, PC is a performance course. It was a athletic development program. So I've always been involved with the youth and just trying to educate them, be a leader, student, just trying to make the world a better place. Try to.
Great. And so your last 5 years were in a classroom.
Correct.
As a certified educator.
Correct. I was a special education teacher and math certified. So I've worked with two school districts thus far.
Okay. And how did you cross paths with Texas Ed 911?
Yeah, so it has to do with why we're here today, the grievance process and my troubles with it or issues with it. Was doing some research on Google, trying to find out more about Public Information Act, Freedom of Information Act laws. Came across an article on Texas Scorecard, I believe you're familiar with. It was I think Texas families are dealing with a broken grievance system. It was by a lawyer, Ms. Davis. And as I was reading it, it was the exact situation I've been put through. But with the employment side, with a teacher's internal complaint. And I know that some of y'all's work had been kind of geared towards parents and students, like as far as the grievance process. But as I was reading it, I was like, these are the exact roadblocks and all the dysfunction that I'm running into with my personal situation. And so from there, I just did a little bit more research on that author, found a couple of YouTube videos from podcast interviews where you were accompanied with her in Texas 911. From there, I just reached out, like I said, that one email, and now I'm here.
Well, we're glad that we connected, and it's nice to have a coalition of parents and educators that are both working towards the same goals and the same aims. As you connected with Texas Ed 911, I'm sure you saw either things like our website or social media and the things that are being posted and the comments that parents are making. You've talked to some of our advocates. What were some of the things that were going through your mind as you're reading all these things? Did you think, these are terrible parents? They're just, capping on teachers. What was going through your mind?
Shared frustrations.
Really?
Common sense that all these parents and most of the people I speak with outside of school districts or the administration of school districts, that it seems so obvious. And just the shared frustrations with some of these violations and complaints that aren't getting looked into, the due process violations. It seems so like common sense oriented that we should have these things in place, and it's not happening.
So with that in mind, let's delve into a little bit about what your grievance process involved. What started this whole endeavor for you? What was the sort of the kickoff for your catalyst for your grievance?
So without getting too deep and too much,
sure.
Started at the beginning of the 2023-2024 academic school year. Some issues with a department manager, my direct supervisor, who was of a different gender, who found me found me to be more than a friend and more than a coworker. I didn't make any complaints. I said my piece as far as I was not interested, but I could see the writing on the wall. Being self-aware and just seeing what happens out in the real world, bureaucracy of everything. I was worried about retaliation, worried about my job. At the same time, I didn't want to ruin anybody's life. Like, I know what this entails. I know what making a formal and official complaint can do to somebody and their reputation. So I didn't say anything until the beginning of the 2023-2024 school year. They were setting up some pretext, trying to threaten me and intimidate me, and sat there, put my phone on record because I knew it was coming. Started recording. I think that was back in August of 2023. I have about six hours worth of recordings up to now, but that's fast forwarding a little bit. But I was placed in a classroom with one female student. I have no issue with that. I used to be a head women's soccer coach. However, the optics of that, right?
Sure, of course.
Sense.
Right.
All I did was ask, hey, is there a policy for one-on-one student and teacher interactions? Should I keep the door open because we have the safety issue? It's like, oh, you have to have a locked door.
Of course.
So it's these common sense things. I just asked for help, asked for directions, point me in the direction of where I should look to even figure out what
policies like employee handbook.
Ignored. I sent it to one person. First, I called. I didn't even try and put it in writing. I didn't email first. All I did, I called and left a voicemail. That person that I had called originally emailed back asking what I wanted. So I put it in writing. Emailed, like, hey, what's the deal? Didn't hear anything back. Elevated it to the next level, assistant principal. Didn't hear anything. Kept asking, oh, hey, I need help. For 2.5 weeks, 21 days, I was kept in the dark on what to do. I would just take that student to the library.
Oh, good. Good idea.
Not because I was worried about anything with me.
Right.
I didn't know anything about this student's home life.
Sure.
What a teacher walking by, what a student walking by, what anything could go wrong.
Sure.
So I was obviously looking out for myself, but looking out for the student, looking out for the school, looking out for the district. And after 3 weeks of hearing nothing, I sent a school-wide email to my staff email, not to the students, but, hey, can anybody help me?
How'd that go?
Yanked into the office and put my recorder on. And from there, I was gaslighted, told basically how wrong it was to do that. I stood my ground, said that I had asked at all these levels, didn't receive any help. And a little more context with that is that the principal and the assistant principal that were doing the intimidating, they were best friends with that department manager that I had referenced at the very beginning that might have made some advances to me that I was not welcoming of, which is why I was recording in the first place, because I could see the writing on the wall. After those 2 meetings, I submitted my formal complaint, my grievance, gave them all of the evidence, all of the recording. I was told that my complaint was founded, my grievance was founded, and I got a relief package put in place. The manager was not to be in a room with me one-on-one. I would not be having any communications with them unless it was work-related. The principal couldn't meet with me one-on-one. There had to be this others. Well, all this stuff, right?
So there was some remedy. In air quotes.
What I thought. A month later, retaliation started again. Same principal, recorded it, submitted it to HR. HR elevated it to the next level. That principal's boss, the director of school leadership for the entire district.
Were you physically threatened?
At that point, no. They did walk up to me, by myself in the library, which was a part of the relief package they weren't supposed to do. But at that point, they hadn't threatened me physically. We'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
But I ended up having a meeting with that principal and the director of school leadership, kind of going through everything. I asked some questions. And for the next couple months, they were trying to set up pretext. And if some people don't know what pretext is, that's reasons to fire this employee that aren't necessarily true. But as long as it's written down on paper somewhere, they can cite that as a reason to fire somebody. So we get to March, and there's a department meeting. I'm asking questions that had, it was related to one of my students, some services that I provided. And keep in mind, this is with that department manager that I had accused of blank, and the principal, both there gaslighting me, trying to deflect, trying not to answer the question in front of my coworkers. And I could see, again, the writing on the wall that they were going to try and spin that on me as being aggressive, when all I was doing was being assertive to, I'm seeing you lying to me. I'm seeing you gaslighting me. I'm not going to go away. Like, I'm not uncomfortable because all I'm doing is trying to get information. You're the one who's uncomfortable. But reported that to HR, what I'm supposed to do. I reported that, said, hey, like, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. I'm worried that they're going to try and spin what just happened and me trying to get information as being aggressive. Let's speed up to a month later, exact same thing happens. This time, it spilled into the hallway. And at this point, I'm holding my laptop, citing the question that I asked, because the principal didn't have any idea what I was talking about. Here, right here, sir, I asked this question. He reaches out towards me and says, I'm gonna, and lunges at me, and rewind a little bit. I'm recording. I was recording that.
Okay.
Audio-wise. I step back, said, what are you going to do? Then he just says, I'm going to delete that thing. So it went from a violent threat to a non-violent threat, because he knew, like, he realized in time, like, I shouldn't have done that. It's like, I'm going to delete that thing. So within that same little exchange in the hallway, he's sitting there gaslighting. The school resource officer walks up, and he's kind of just watching everything. And he ended up stepping in and saying, hey, like, let's revisit this in an hour. The cop says this. And I said, yeah, like, it's fine with me. Like, I'm good.
Right.
And the principal is behind the cop, getting in my face, like, no, I'm not going to. He's antagonizing me while the cop is there, getting in my face.
We have heard similar things like this when a student is being threatened with discipline alternative education placement, that they hold the kid kind of hostage without a parent or any other advocate handy, and they're just being forced or pushed into admitting something, writing an admission, saying who was there. I mean, even admitting to things that weren't even true. They're just in a pressure cooker. Did you feel like you were in a pressure cooker?
As far as, like, me not being able to do anything else except for sit there and take it, yeah. I never admitted to anything because I didn't do anything wrong. But he's the principal. He's the boss. He makes all the decisions. But word for word, this guy goes, the principal is like, yeah, I'm the worst principal ever. Go complain about it. Go complain about it. All on audio. Go work somewhere else. If you're not happy here, go work somewhere else. Word for word, I have it on audio. Is
this typical behavior? Do you know other educators who have faced this kind of treatment?
If they did, they probably wouldn't be in education anymore. I would, in my specific case, I don't think that some would have reached that point because they don't want to deal with that. They're not going to, I guess, ruffle feathers when all I'm doing is just standing up for myself and trying to get information. But from that exchange, the principal filed a complaint against me.
Oh, interesting.
So it was basically like, in regards to out in the real world, if somebody assaults somebody and then they call the cops.
Right.
And so now I'm looked at as the one who
You're
was
the
in the
bad
wrong,
guy.
and that the assaulter was the victim.
You talked about some due process issues in your grievance, and we're deeply concerned about that too, across the entire grievance process and for almost anybody who files a grievance. I've had a few successes with grievances, but most parents don't. It sounds like you didn't either in your case. Can you describe some of the due process violations that you feel you experienced in your grievance?
Yeah, and it's directly following that story. During their investigation of that principal's complaint, they're interviewing witnesses. I had to ask them to look at the surveillance video. They had no plans to look at the surveillance tape that would have shown him lunging at me. But in writing, I said, "You go look at this. Go talk to here." And then I also submitted my audio of that interaction. I filed my complaint. So he filed the complaint on April 2nd. Whenever that interaction occurred, I realized that nothing's going to happen as far as them listening to me and my story. They're going to take the principal side of things. So I filed my complaint on April 23rd. The next day, I was called in and told they were going to fire me.
Oh, the next day after you filed a grievance?
The very next day. And they cited that the reason was because it was in the best interest of the district. I thought whenever I got the call to go into HR on the next day, like April 24th, I thought it was either going to be one to tell me the findings of that the principal's complaint, like what they found from, or I thought it was going to be in relation to the complaint that I just filed. No, it was to tell me that they were firing me. And I was like, and I didn't make a fuss there because I knew that the people at the time telling me, they had no idea like what was going on.
And what was your response to that?
Can you tell me what the findings were of that investigation that occurred, that the principal made the complaint? Like, did that have any effect on your decision now? They had no information for me. They didn't provide me the investigation summary, which is what you're supposed to do after an investigation.
Right.
And then I asked, okay, well, now that you're firing me, does that mean that my complaint that I just filed, is that just going to get lost by the wayside? Like, is it not going to even be looked into? They're like, no, go look into it. And I said, okay.
And that was your grievance, right?
That was my grievance on the 23rd, my second formal grievance against the same people.
Okay, so you went through the grievance process as a separated employee, essentially,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then what happened with that? I know you talked about evidence that you mentioned that to me earlier. What happened with the evidence? You said you had hours of audio recording and that there was video surveillance. What happened to those things?
Yeah. So again, on that during the April 24th meeting where they were firing me, they didn't provide me the investigation summary. They didn't tell me anything about it. For the grievance that I filed, I got my hearing on May 6th after they had already voted to terminate me, because I went to the board meeting on May 2nd where they were going to decide, like, hey, are we going to terminate him? Because they recommended to the board that they not renew my contract. I got my 3 minutes that you're supposed to sign up for speaker participation, and I begged the school district to look more into my situation. I didn't accuse them of anything. I just said, hey, there's been stuff going on. Please look into this more before taking the vote. I didn't even ask them not to vote me out. I was just like, at least take a look. They came back from closed session and voted to terminate me. That was on May 2nd of 2024. May 6th was when I went through my level 1. That's when I got my level 1.
Oh gosh. Okay.
hearing.
That was a long time later.
Mhm.
Okay.
Said everything, like told him this is what has happened, everything that we kind of talked about. I had to
Sure.
re-explain the story.
Yeah.
I explained what took place on April 2nd, my version of the story, and concluded the hearing. I had submitted all the evidence that I had already submitted back during the April 2nd investigation, but I submitted the audio, I submitted all my videos, everything that was needed. I went by the book, and I got their response on May 24th, the district's response, where after I'd already, in my grievance, I said, hey, like, that was a sham investigation, basically, is what I cited. I was like, I don't believe all measures were taken during this investigation.
Reasonable. You expect an investigation to happen when you file a grievance, and
And their answer, their reply, because they denied all my reliefs, was because an investigation already took place, we don't have to do another one.
oh my goodness. So basically, the non-investigation that happened the first time was the
That I
reason why the
complained
second
about.
one wasn't going to happen.
The one that I complained about, that I called them out and saying, hey, that was a sham investigation. Please investigate this. Their reason for
Mhm.
not granting my relief measures and not
Mhm.
investigating was because they already did an investigation.
So that's interesting. That is also something we hear a lot, even through TEA investigations and the State Board of Educator certification. You know, when there's been a report of misconduct, there are claims that there are investigations happening, but we've seen evidence that no investigation has happened, or testimony that that betrays that fact. So it sounds like you really do go through just about all the same issues, and so you're supposed to have 3 levels of grievance hearing, and it sounds like you were denied at level 1, level 2. You got to level 3, and apparently they just decided to take a vote, and they said they didn't have to do another investigation. What did you do after that?
So after the level 1, I appealed, had my level 2 hearing in June of 2024, got the same answer. Hey, there's already been an investigation. Appealed that in July. So what is supposed to take place after the level 2 is obviously the level 3. The district is supposed to reach out to me and say, hey, this is when your level 3 hearing is going to take place. And it should have taken place at the very next school board meeting, which would have been August. I didn't hear anything back except for on August 1st, on Thursday, which was the school board meeting. I got a call from the deputy superintendent asking where I was at.
Where was he?
I said, I'm at home. Where are you? No, he said, we're at your hearing. We're at your level 3 hearing. Where are you at?
Wow. So no
Yes.
notification.
Yeah, I said, did anybody reach out to me? Did anybody tell me that this was taking place? And he was like, oh, well, that's kind of why we're calling now. There's some confusion. I said, no, nobody told me. Nobody even acknowledged that I had submitted my appeal. He said, oh, okay, well, we'll get it scheduled for the next board meeting. I said, okay. So I'm just playing along, just going through the motions because I know they're not going to do anything. I've had enough experience, and if you're going to listen to other people who've gone through experiences and not apply the knowledge that they've given you, then what are you doing? So I've known what was happening. I had a former coach and teacher whenever I was in high school. He ended up being a principal who got ousted. I was kind of counseling with him throughout the whole process. So he put me on to what was going to be taking place, what the district was going to try and do. So I show up to that September hearing, and I speculated that they weren't going to provide the evidence that I had submitted. So I put in an open records request for that surveillance tape. In the hearing, they denied the open records request that had already been approved by their communications officer. They subdued even more evidence, and they asked me about 20 different times in 6 different ways if I submitted that evidence. I was not confused. I knew that I submitted the evidence. I said, yes. I submitted it. Do we want to postpone this so you can go and make sure, so we can check back on what I'm saying. Do you want to go consult with your lawyers?
Were they saying they did not have it?
They asked 20 times, and then at one point they did say that I didn't. Then why would you ask me? If you already know the answer, why even entertain? Why even ask me?
And some people don't know this, but essentially whatever you provide as evidence during a level 1 hearing essentially has to stay. The record stands unless you learn something new. And if there is new evidence that's presented, you are allowed to add it. But otherwise, and it has to be agreed upon by both parties, but otherwise the record that you set at level 1. So going into a level 1 grievance, unaware, uninformed, or not understanding how this works, you could be deeply handicapped, but you knew, and you submitted all the evidence and recordings, and your evidence was not taken seriously, or they didn't even acknowledge that you had submitted it.
Right. And when I offered them postponement, because like I said, I wasn't confused. I knew what I did. I knew I submitted it. I said, hey, like, I don't want to be this way. I don't want to have to be assertive. I don't want to call you out to your face right now. You're making me do this, but if you want to go and talk with your lawyers to figure this out, or if you, not even lawyers, just if you want to go look into this more, or right now, if you want to call that communications officer, call them right now in the meeting. I'm here. Like, I have plenty of time, all the time in the world. We're on your schedule. This is your hearing. They didn't want that. They said, no, we're finishing this tonight. No postponement.
No postponement, no full record of evidence.
No. And then, so.
Did they vote that night?
They didn't vote that night. They ended up just going forward. They started my 15 minutes of time, and I sat there in silence for 15 minutes.
Wow.
I sat there in silence because without the evidence that I submitted to prove that the decisions that were made were inadequate or that they were wrong, I can't do that without the evidence. I can't do that without the surveillance video that you're in possession of. They tried to cite that I didn't submit the video. How do I submit a surveillance tape from your school district? I don't have access to your security system. It's logical common sense like that. Like, you and I are understanding, like, I don't have access to a security system. I asked the school board president, I said, I don't have access to your surveillance system. Are we all in agreement? What do you think? Do you think
Did they say yes?
He said potentially. He said potentially. And then he deflects. He said when, and he looked over to the HR rep and it's like, so when did this grievance process start? It's like deflects. So then we go through the timeline.
Wow.
HR's perspective of things. But essentially, they didn't want postponement. They wanted to force it through that night. I didn't have all the evidence to use. They didn't vote on it. I sat in silence. 3 weeks later, I get a call. Because I thought at that point, I was like, well, like, this is over. The grievance process is over. 3 weeks later, I got a call from that HR rep saying, hey, you were right. We violated your due process. Word for word, verbatim. We'd like to offer you another hearing. Or like, would you agree to a new hearing? And I said, well, up to this point, I've been pretty accommodating. I've been pretty flexible. And all that's done is hinder me. All that's done is hurt me. So right now, I'm not saying yes or no. But I need to go.
This would be your third level 3 hearing.
Which, so 5th or 6th level hearing.
Right. So that you had the one that you were never notified of. You had the second one wherein they did not acknowledge your evidence. And then now they say, oh, we violated your due process. That's interesting. You even got that response.
Exactly.
That's pretty novel. You don't hear that often.
It wasn't on paper though. It was on the phone. Oh. So they think like, oh, we can say this and it won't get documented.
That's right. So what do you know what? That's a good point that you bring that up. What should somebody do if they're getting a phone call?
Well, if you have a recorder with you, or if you have a spouse, a significant other, anybody else that has a phone right there or something that can record that phone conversation, because even if you try and record through your phone while you're on the call, it won't pick up the audio.
Sure.
So make sure that you have either another, and that's hard to do because this was a spontaneous call.
That's right.
Like this was 3 weeks later out of the blue. Hey, like, would you like to do this? Like, would you agree to this? Because that's the only way that you can deviate from that timeline. Like
Did you go through with that? Did you go through with the third?
Well, at the time, back to that call, I said, I'm not saying yes or no right now. I need to go and consult with basically my legal counsel that didn't exist. Me using Google, that would have been what I did.
Right.
And then about an hour later, I got another call, same person saying, hey, we're going to have that hearing whether you're there or not.
So it wasn't your choice after all?
It wasn't my choice. I said, okay, well, what's going to happen to the hearing that we just had?
Right.
The second level 3 hearing. Oh, I don't know. Because I speculated that they were just going to try and sweep it under the rug. Like a mulligan. They were going to get a redo and then not even reference what just took place in September, which is exactly what they tried to do. I never agreed. Obviously, I never agreed to the hearing, but the hearing was going to take place whether I was there or not. And I knew that I could not go.
Right. Because isn't that a violation of board policy for them to change the timeline or offer a different meeting if you didn't, but both parties don't agree to change?
That's what it says on paper, and that's what it says in their DGBA local policy.
Right.
Which is what we're about to get to with the whole due process thing.
Yes.
They can violate it and there's no accountability. Like nobody's going to hold them accountable for violating their own policy. They're the ones that are supposed to hold themselves accountable. But I knew that if I didn't show up to that hearing, they could use that against me. Like, oh, he's not trying to work with us. He's not really trying to figure this out. I make it synonymous to if you get a write-up at work, and even though it could all be made up, if you don't sign that write-up, that's another violation. He's being insubordinate because he didn't sign that write-up. So I went into that October 3rd hearing, and I said, I got my time to go up to... Well, first I was going to ask a question because the school board president, which was also the... what's it called? Basically the presiding officer.
Oh, yeah.
The one running the hearing.
The grievance.
Explaining what's about to take place, the parameters of this hearing. And all he was doing was verbatim of what just took place in the September hearings, just saying, like, this is your level 3 hearing. This is how it's going to go. You'll get 15 minutes. They'll get 15 minutes, 5 minutes of rebuttal. And at this point, are there any questions from the parties or the board members? And I raised my hand, and he's looking around trying to ignore me. One of the board members sitting next to him taps him on the shoulder and points at me, and he kind of gives me a head nod. And I was about to ask my question, like basically, like, hey, how is this supposed to work? It's September, just in normal questions that one would have. He snaps at me and says, "You're not a board member."
Oh, parties. You're not a party to the...
No, he didn't say that. He didn't say party. Are there any questions from the parties or the board members? He only asked the board members, even though everybody in that room heard, are there any questions from the parties or the board members? But that's one little off, like, by the wayside. But so when it gets to my time to speak, my 15 minutes, I walk up there and I said, "My name is Nicholas. I do not consent to any deviation from the local board policy, to the timeline, just everything. What you just cited about, there has to be an agreement between both parties that, hey, we're not going to stick to this policy." And so I was like, I'm here to be a resource if you have questions from our last hearing, my official level 3 hearing that we had in September. I'm here if you want to ask questions about that, but I'm not participating in a new hearing. And that was really the whole gist of that conversation, or that hearing, was me just being there, just like, hey, I'm here against my will, but I have to be here because I'll know you'll use it against me.
Right. So how did they rule in that level 3?
Against me. Oh. And they at the end of
surprise.
Yeah, at the end of that hearing, the level 3 hearing, I didn't even notice it until later when I was listening to the audio. The board can only use evidence from this presentation tonight,
Oh my goodness.
which would have been great to know prior to the hearing. Maybe I would have said my piece.
Yeah,
if I
reiterated your
would've-
whole case.
if I would have been able to ask, hey, what are the parameters of this? Which I probably still wouldn't have because I didn't agree to having this hearing. But that would have just been great information to know that, hey, we're going to
Right.
wipe the slate clean.
If you say nothing, there is no record. Yeah, essentially.
So we come out of that closed board meeting and they voted against me 7-0. They didn't accept my appeal, basically upheld all the other
That's
decisions.
a very popular vote outcome for most level 3
Sadly.
grievances in
Sadly,
Texas. We hear that a lot. What could you do after that? I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but multiple level 3 grievance hearings, which is kind of silly. What's your next step? Where can you go to pursue that due process that you talked about? Now, due process, in case someone wouldn't know, it's just the constitutional principle that you deserve to be heard and you deserve to redress your grievances to a governmental agency, whichever one is has jurisdiction to hear your grievance. And it's a constitutional principle.
Cited in both the 5th and 14th Amendment.
Yes, and it's also, in some ways tied into free speech as well, and the First Amendment. And it's so. Where did you seek redress at that point?
So what I could have done from there was immediately go to the EEOC employment and just start pursuing legal remedies for wrongful termination, retaliation, all of that. What I found on the TEA was the 7.057 appeal.
And that's education code, right? So Texas Education Code 7.057.
It's supposed to be an appeal to the grievance process. If you felt that there was a law violated during the grievance process, fill out this appeal. And the Commissioner of Education will review it. And if there was indeed a violation, they'll send it back down to get looked into.
Okay.
And that's the thing. It's like, that's all that the remedies... That's the only remedy that the Commissioner of Education can have if they even have jurisdiction. They're not there to make a decision. They're not there to say yes or no to my relief measures that I asked for, like, hey, don't fire me. Hey, investigate this. All the Commissioner of Education can do is review the local record. If they did deem that there was a law violated, they just send it right back down to the district to do a redo.
Okay.
It's not like anything could have even, like I said, the Commissioner of Education couldn't have ruled in my favor of the actual appeal to the original grievance that I filed.
Right. But you've gotten that back now, right? You've gotten his response back. What was the response?
That they didn't have jurisdiction. What a surprise, right?
No jurisdiction to hear about your due process violation?
Yeah. So I had to... So within the 7.057 appeal, you have to find a Texas law, like under Title 1 or 2,
of the Education Code
that you felt was violated. That's the only way that the Commissioner of Education could actually have jurisdiction and actually do something. I thought I found that. I think it was 33.903.
Okay, so that's Texas Education Code, Chapter 33.093.
Yeah, and it's basically just citing any federal law violation. The commissioner has jurisdiction to initiate an investigation.
Did he?
No. What I cited as the federal law that they violated was my violation of due process, the violation under the color of law.
We're laughing. We shouldn't be laughing. I mean, it's just kind of comical. We keep asking, and we're so hopeful.
Yeah, I know. I laughed at their face.
We're so hopeful that someone is going to do the right thing. And so you get to the end of the line, and you worked in Texas education, and we all know that the Commissioner of Education is where the buck stops.
Yep.
But when the buck stopped at his office, he said, I don't have jurisdiction.
Yep. So the federal law I tried to cite was Title 18 USC Section 242. And that's under the color of law, that prohibits the deprivation of rights or privileges protected by the Constitution or the laws of the United States. So I allege that they violated my due process, 5th and 14th Amendment. But but that's a federal law, right? So technically not a Texas education law. How I tried to tie that in was with the 39.003 law. In any event, 39.003 simply establishes permissive reasons for the commissioner to authorize a special investigation of a school district. Although the commissioner can authorize a special investigation, he does not do so through a 7.057 appeal. Thus, the commissioner lacks 7.057 jurisdiction over my claims.
Wow. Well, I've read a number of commissioner opinions, and I honestly, it's so rare, very, very rare that someone actually gets a decision other than the one that you're stating.
Yeah.
The further back you go, and we do a lot of research at Texas Ed 911, and so I can tell you that in 2022 and 2023, there was a much higher percentage of appeals that came back with the no jurisdiction finding. And just in the last year, we've seen that number tick down a little bit. This is what we're a solutions-oriented group at Texas Ed 911, and since we've connected, we've talked a little bit about that. What's a solution for something like this? If the commissioner of education doesn't have jurisdiction to handle your matter, and he is the top dog in the state's education apparatus, what do we do? What's the solution for this?
Inspector General, just somebody to hold people accountable. Like, they violated. Like, even if they didn't violate it, like, let's say somebody actually investigated it and it's found like, oh no, they didn't violate the due process. There's nobody right now that can even look to see if your due process has been violated. So just actually invoking the Constitution, actually upholding the Constitution, whether it be the Texas Constitution, whether it be the Constitution of the United States that guarantees a citizen to a right of due process, a fair trial. That is, there shouldn't be any debate about that.
Right.
I don't know what confusion is being, like, what's getting lost in translation that, oh, we don't know how to hold people accountable. We don't know how to basically guarantee due process. We can't hold anybody accountable. Right now, what I'm seeing, what you're seeing, what all of the studies are showing is that there's nobody holding these districts and these school districts accountable to due process. And how we cross paths, it's that, yes, this is my personal situation. Yes, I want to be vindicated. I want to be right. But I can see the big picture that if they're trying to do this to me, how many other teachers this is happening to that are in worse positions or worse situations. How many parents and students are being silenced or being just felt like they have no help. And it's all to just keep the status quo.
Right.
And they shouldn't have anybody asking questions. But it's very sad that this is a conversation that we're having in 2025, that there's still people out there that don't have due process law.
No, that's right. I mean, we're seeing even a lot on the national stage, a lot of, shall we say, sunlight being shown on the administrative state. Let's put it that way. Whether it's budgets, lack of efficiency, lack of justice, lack of due process, all of that is being exposed on such a mega scale right now on the national scene. Do we need that in Texas?
Yes. Yes, just for like our situation, like we said, with parents, with students. But what I would say to anybody out there going through this, whether it be a parent and a student that's filing a complaint or a grievance, whether it be a teacher or a maintenance worker, a principal, counselor, paraprofessional, keep your composure, because you're going to get gaslit. You're going to get frustrated based off of whether it be incompetence, whether it be deliberate or not, willful negligence or unwillful, unknowing. Keep your composure as best as you can. Document everything. Don't just write notes. Don't just tell somebody that this is what happened. Like, yes, you can give the best account by telling like your significant other, telling somebody else, another assistant principal. They're going to change the story if you don't have evidence. Record. Use your phone, whether it be a voice memo or video, press record. It's a one-party state. You don't have to get their consent. And that sounds so adversarial. You have to do what you have to do right now. You can tell them, like, hey, I'm recording this. They'll probably be a little bit on their toes, and they're going to get flustered, or they're going to feel like it's adversarial, but you have no choice right now. We have no choice. But it's a one-party state. You don't have to have their consent. So whether you want to do it, put it in your pocket, or if you just want it out there, hey, I'm recording. Let's have our conversation. And even I can't even guarantee you that that's going to do anything, at least at the district level, because I did all that. Like I said, 6 hours worth of audio recording, documenting the lying, documenting the gaslighting, documenting the threats. Nothing bad happened by the district. The district didn't do anything wrong.
Wow. Well, you mentioned to me in a previous conversation preparing for this interview that you were tipped off to some of their techniques in terms of alerting other people in their environment that they might be recording. What was that like?
Yeah. And I'll just what I saw based off of the heads up that I got from other people that had gone through the process, like that they're going to be recording everything. They're going to try and utilize like multiple people, like, oh, you made coworkers uncomfortable. That's why I mentioned keep your composure as best as you can. My issue was where I went wrong was that I'm a big, deep-voiced man, and I had to be assertive to the principal who's sitting there gaslighting me. I didn't yell, but because I'm in a serious tone, because it's a serious matter, I'm aggressive. So there's that there, and so I make people uncomfortable because I'm being assertive and asserting my rights. But that's the keep your composure instance. But as far as I was in a meeting back in September of 2023, way at the back. I requested another principal come in and listen to what was taking place, because this was back with the intimidator, like the assistant principal and the principal. I was like, I don't feel comfortable with y'all two. Give me somebody else, like bring somebody else in. So they tried to fight it, but I was like, bring somebody else in. When that assistant principal arrived, I didn't hear it at the time. If I knew to look for it, I might have heard it. But right before the principal was about to start, give his little speech, like, oh, we brought you in here for this. You hear. So it's their little signal that, hey, we're about to start recording. Be on your P's and Q's. Watch what you say. So that was, and it happened again in the my third level 3 hearing. I can hear it in the audio. You hear it. So it's just, so it might not be that exact thing. It might be or just some random thing you think it's like off base. Like,
some sort of audio cue.
Yeah, like, what was that about? And you think it's something like but meaningless. But in the end, it was a signal for something. So they know what they're doing. They're gonna claim confusion, lost in translation, miscommunication. They know exactly what they're doing.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and we certainly are glad to have linked arms with you and other educators. We are getting an increase in outreach from teachers, and so we encourage you to please go visit our website, texased911.com, and at the bottom of the website, you'll see a tab for Submit Your Story. Please share your story if you have been harmed by a Texas public school, or if a child has been harmed by a Texas public school and you would like our help. We do prioritize those that have evidence. And so we can't really work on hearsay. If you need help navigating the system, the grievance process, or what your options are, depending on where you are in that process, please reach out to us. Also, please consider signing up for our alerts. Hit the Contact Us button and give us your name and email so we can keep you informed of our solutions throughout the 89th legislative session. We'd love to include you and give you things to do that would help push some of our solutions forward, like the Inspector General that we talked about in this episode with Nico. Also, if you are of means and if you appreciate the work that we're doing, please consider giving a non-tax deductible donation. We are a Texas nonprofit corporation, but we do not even have federal standing. We are essentially just a group of grassroots parents helping other parents and teachers. And so with your donations, we make copies, we pay for gas to get to Austin. Sometimes overnight hotels are required. We cover meals, that kind of thing. And we pay the monthly expenses for things like the internet and the various communication modes that we need to keep in touch with you. So thank you again, Nico, for joining us. I'm sure I look forward to another opportunity to interview and work with you again. I want to thank you very much for your time and for watching us. Until the next time, be safe, protect your kids, and God bless your day.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We ask you to share this on all your social media and by text so we can wake up more Texans to the problems within our school system. But we also want to give hope with our grassroots solutions. Let's make Texas schools Texan again. To support us, visit TexasEd911.com.